Welcome, especially new people, to the Knoxville Writers Guild, which has been helping writers improve and market their writing skills for more than 25 years. There are a lot of writing groups in Knoxville, but this sets us apart. Tonight's program is led by Laura Still, our highly esteemed two-term president and the storyteller behind Knoxville Walking Tours. Whenever we have an open mic night, I can't help but notice how wonderful Laura's presentation is and wish that I could do better. And tonight, she's going to let us in on some tricks of the trade. So Laura?
Okay then, well, I'm going to go ahead and just add a couple of things to what Cindy said. And I've been doing Knoxville Walking Tours since 2012. So here's the deal. I've been telling stories for a long time now. And a lot of what I'm going to tell you tonight is, it's all good basic stuff, but I want you to remember that I've been doing this a really long time. I've practiced a lot. And that is the main thing I'll keep saying tonight is practice, practice, practice. And that is one of the things that I want to just point out is, you know, I wasn't always able to do this off the cuff all the time, but when you start doing walking tours, you're basically doing a one-woman show, an interactive situation where you're changing sets all the time, and having to deal with, you know, suddenly the sidewalk on the route that you usually go on has been blocked by construction or some large machine. I'm like, oh, I'm gonna have to reroute. Oh, so let's go around this way. So you have to change your story on the fly all the time because you're dealing with things that are outside of your control. So that is great practice for being able to talk to people behind a microphone. It just, having an audience that's actually captured and in the same place just seems like a, you know, almost too easy at times. But that is, like I said, because I've had 8 years of doing this, and hopefully we'll have many, many more. Now, the other thing that I want to say, I want to thank the Guild for letting me talk again. They're always very good to let me share things with people. And I am very grateful to be here with what I consider to be part of my Knoxville family, because I have been a Guild member for longer than 25 years. So I think they're a little older than Cindy actually mentioned, but I joined so long ago, I can't even remember the date, but it was in the 90s, 95, 96, somewhere around there. So I've been coming to these meetings and experiencing all kinds of different things and learning from these people for a really long time. And I appreciate any time they are kind enough to let me take over the program. It's always an honor. And I also want to thank one other person. I already bragged about my daughter-in-law, but her husband, Winston Sullivan, is my son. And the technical stuff that I'm going to share with you tonight has been vetted by an expert. He is getting his doctorate in vocal performance and music education. So he has studied the production of the voice and all kinds of really esoteric stuff that I won't go into tonight. But if you have questions and that I can't answer, I will refer you to him. And he has authorized me to give his email address to anybody that wants it. He is also, I've been taking vocal lessons from him for the past month or so. I think we've had about four lessons now, but he's not doing that except with people like me that are in his bubble right now. But if you want to meet with him on Zoom, he is open to doing that as well if you want some extra practice with some of the things I'm going to teach you tonight. So I thank him very much for devoting a lot of time and reading over my presentation and correcting a lot of the mistakes that I had made about technical matters, because I am so glad I let him look at it, because he kept me from embarrassing myself. So now we're going to talk first just about the normal kind of situation that most writers run into is we are asked to do a reading, either at an open mic, a meeting, or a book signing, or a book launch, or that sort of thing. I've kind of tailored my presentation to what writers might expect to be asked to do. And there's lots of common misconceptions about how you do this. And one of the most common is that you need to impart information. I mean, you think that when you're reading to your audience, you think that they need more information about your story or react to it. So you want to telegraph the meaning of the story so that they'll understand it properly. and you want them to make sure you want to make sure they draw the proper conclusion for everything you're trying to do. So, you know, people say things like, well, this shows that this character is really dangerous. You don't have to tell people that. You should be choosing to say that with what you're reading to them. So let's say that you go straight to the action by saying, Maud Malloy took her gun out of the glove compartment, made sure it was fully loaded, and released the safety catch. Do you wonder if this woman is dangerous or not now? No, you know she is dangerous. So you don't have to tell them this is a dangerous woman. They already know. Another problem that people have with readings is they want to read it exactly as they wrote it, word for word. Reproduce it perfectly, even with the punctuation. I mean, they want to pause in all the places. Well, you know, this really leads to a lot of stress because you can't really experience the story yourself as you are telling. And I'll talk a lot more about experiencing the story because I think that's very, very important. You know, this is your story and you know it better than anyone. So that means you don't have to memorize it word by word. When you're you know, as writers, especially when we're starting out, we think every word we write is gold, right? Especially after it's been edited. So this is perfect. It has to be done just this way. But that's not true. When you're reading something out loud, the immediacy of your presentation is much more important than missing a word or an adjective or, you know, even a sentence at times. You can drop something and nobody is going to notice as long as you are being, you know, you're relaxed and letting the words flow. There's also a certain need in writers, especially when they're just starting out, to be taken seriously. So they feel like they've got to give some sort of explicit statement about their credentials, their education, the goals that they had for this piece that they're reading, and their emotional involvement. I mean, they just go on, and you gotta let this go. It's too much information. People don't need to know it. They don't want to know this stuff. They want you to get to the story. They don't want to be distracted by all this back stuff. If you're passionate about the piece you're reading, you need to let that passion for this piece flow into your reading and not try to explain it or lead them to believe how serious you are before. That kind of is related to the last thing I'm going to mention, is that need to get the expected response. You know, people worry that the listeners won't feel what they want them to feel. They won't laugh at the jokes. You know, they won't get excited. They won't be startled. You know, you want them to get the right reaction at the right places in your story, but that really distracts you terribly from doing the story well. If you're constantly looking for that, you know, the cliche here is the comedian that says, gives you the punchline that says, get it? I mean, you shouldn't have to ask that. If they got it, you know, you'll know. You know, to me, the whole secret of storytelling is to focus on the way the story makes you feel, to let those feelings in, because there is nothing as riveting to me as a genuinely sincere performance. And people just can't look away from that. And that's one of the things that doesn't come natural to most people, but it's something that all of us can really do with practice. Now, part of doing that is to choose the piece that you're reading very carefully. You always have a time limit. Either if it's an open mic, it's a very firm time limit of 3 or 4 minutes. If it's on a television thing, it might be 2 minutes. You don't know. It may be less. I've been told 30 seconds on a radio interview before. You got 30 seconds. What do you want to say? You know, that's pretty tough. So you need to choose the piece that you're going to read very carefully and think about the time limit. The most important time limit is your audience's attention span. Always stop reading before they want you to stop reading. Okay, that is the biggest secret to me to doing a successful reading, is to stop before they want you to. Always leave them wanting more. Now, when you're choosing a piece, you've got to have a hook just right in the beginning, the first sentence, to stop the guy in the back row from looking at his phone, right? So you want to avoid certain things: exposition, long descriptions, choppy dialogue. Particularly the dialogue in an oral reading is difficult because it's hard for people to tell who's speaking. So you need to be careful with choosing a piece with a lot of dialogue in it. You need a piece that has an emotional arc, however, some sort of conflict, something that builds to a crisis, or at least something that has a surprise or a twist at the end. It should stand alone. You don't want to waste time on a setup here. Because you've got a time limit and you don't want to trespass on your audience's attention, you want to make sure that you go straight to the piece. Now, if you're doing an excerpt from a long work like a novel, a sort of a minimal setup is okay. But you just need to be as brief as you can and choose a piece that pretty much stands on its own, even if it's just a paragraph in a novel. And let me just tell you one of my pet peeves: never, ever explain a poem. Never, ever. That's just, hardly ever say never, but that is that's one of the times I do. That drives me crazy when people try to explain a poem. Now, you want to know your material, not just what you're reading for this particular occasion, but you want to know the backstory. You want to be able to see the color of the walls. You want to be able to hear the wind, the water. You want to be able to feel the wind, the air on your face. Everything about that scene needs to be as real to you as if you are inside it. And you don't have to explain any of this to your audience. If you're doing it right, you won't have to tell them any of this stuff. Now, of course, just because you wrote this scene or this poem doesn't mean you automatically know how to get this feeling, but you can get there, and I'm going to help you. We're going to, it's never going to be real enough to your listeners if you don't believe in it. So you have to be able to step into the scene and believe that you are right there inside that story. Now we're going to look at some great examples of great writing, which capture some of the things that I've been talking about. So let me see if I can do the share screen part properly. And we're going to go, can everybody see that? Did anybody see that? I'm trying to get it to show up here. Okay, let's try that again. Okay, can you see it now?
Okay, got it.
Okay, got it. Okay, well, this first one is pretty easy to recognize. This is the opening of Moby Dick by Herman Melville. And I think it's probably one of the greatest openings of all time. I think it's made the top 10 list for centuries now. But I want you to look at how he starts. Call me Ishmael. He doesn't have to tell you who Ishmael is. You don't have to know. And then he goes into a flashback. And by the time he gets to the end of that next sentence, you are starting to get pulled into his world. So some years ago, never mind how long precisely, having little or no money in my purse and nothing in particular to interest me on shore, I thought I would sail about a little and see the watery part of the world. You're already entering into his world by the time you get to the end of that sentence. And everything he says following that puts you in his place where he is. He talks about his feelings, and by the time he explains his feelings, you are feeling that way too. You are getting into that damp, drizzly November part of your soul, and you're right there with him. So at the very end, he does something really special. He pulls you into the story. There is nothing surprising in this. If they but knew it, almost all men in their degree, sometime or another, cherish very nearly the same feelings towards the ocean with me. So now we're in the scene with him. It's beautiful. I don't know of anybody who's ever done it better. We're going to look at some other ones that are pretty cool though. I like this next one because of the juxtaposition of these two really unlike things. Here is the beginning: two tires fly, two wail, a bamboo groove all chopped down, from it warring songs. Is the best that Corporal Bobby Shafto can do on short notice. He's standing on the running board, gripping his Springfield with one hand and the rear view mirror with the other. Okay, so that first part is a haiku, right? poetry. He starts with poetry and then it goes straight into this hideous action scene that there's all kinds of crazy things happening. And this guy with his Springfield rifle is writing a haiku in his head. So it's that juxtaposition of these two strangely different things that makes this so very effective. And, you know, those of you people who may not recognize that as a haiku, if you're not a poet, you might not. But he makes sure at the end that you understand what he's getting at, because he says, not saying, hey, that was a haiku. He says, the modern world's hell on haiku writers. Electrical generator is what, 8 syllables? You can't even fit that onto the second line. So it's humor at the same time, you know, so he has that twist at the end, that kind of tweak of humor to keep you reading the rest of the book. And it is a very good book if you've never read it. This next one is a slightly different one, and I'll explain why I like it. People a lot of times like to do readings where they've got some really wonderful piece of poetic description. And that's great up to a point, but you don't want it to be the only thing that you do. You can't just read about a place. The reason I like this one, he is starting out with a description, but he doesn't tell you as much as you, he doesn't describe it as much as he pulls you into where he is. Now, one of the things you probably need to know is Cloud Atlas by David Mitchell starts, and this gentleman who's writing is using archaic language because that is the century in which he is writing this. He's in the 1800s. So when he starts talking about this, he says, beyond the Indian hamlet upon a forlorn strand, I happened upon a trail of recent footprints. And then the next sentence talks about bamboo and coconuts, and you don't have to say, okay, he's in a tropical island, because he's already told you that without telling you, right? So his description of the place is very short, but it's very effective. Also, he gives you another clue about it being sort of out of the world by saying, if there be any eyrie so desolate, no isle so removed, that one may there resort unchallenged by an Englishman. 'Tis not on any map I ever saw. So he's pointing out the strangeness of meeting this fellow, but at the same time pointing out that it kind of gives you his opinion of Englishmen at the same time. So you start to get into this guy's head by the end of that paragraph and understand he's in a strange place, but he is totally unsurprised to have met this other Englishman because he feels that's how Englishmen are. They're everywhere. Now this other one takes some chances. This last one I'm going to show you, because I remember I said that about dialogue. This one has quite a bit of dialogue in it, but one of the things I like about it, this is a Murakami novel, and he's talking in these first 2 paragraphs about what he's doing. And when the phone rang, I was in the kitchen. So he's starting off with some action, some phone. You can hear the phone ringing, and this has got a typo in it. It's supposed to be a pot full of spaghetti, and whistling along with the symphony that he's listening to. So you know a lot about this guy already. He can cook. He's making spaghetti, and then the next paragraph tells you that he's in need of a job. It could have been a job. That's the only reason he picked up the phone. He wanted to stay, and the spaghetti was nearly done. He wanted to stay and listen to the music, but it could have been a job. So obviously this guy's in need of a job. The dialogue itself is somewhat peculiar, but it tells you a lot about the person who's narrating the story. And there's a woman on the other end. It's not somebody he knows. And excuse me, to whom did you wish to speak? Sounds like he's a little suspicious, right? So he's still trying to figure out who she is. And so he tries to ask her to call back another time when he realizes it's not a job opening, or probably not a job opening. And he really wants to get back to his spaghetti. And so he asks her to call back. And then she says, spaghetti? What are you doing cooking spaghetti at 10:30 in the morning? That is your first clue that this is not dinner time, right? All this other portion of the program, you thought that he was cooking his dinner, right? There's the twist. 10:30 in the morning. None of your business. I decide what I eat and when I eat it. Now you know a lot about this guy. You know a heck of a lot about this guy by the end of this. So I'm going to close this off if I can. Let me see if I can figure out how to do that. Unshare things. Every time I do this, I realize I don't know as much about Zoom as I think I do, but let's just close this. Okay, that should do it. All right, are we all back? So all those were good examples, and you can probably think of other ones. The main thing is that you're trying to choose a piece that has something that's going to pull people into your world. Now, once you've chosen this good piece, you've got to, the thing that's hard is putting it across. And there's some physical elements to preparing to read to a live audience. And, you know, some people are more gifted than others when it comes to vocal cords, meaning they have more volume, more resonance, more tone naturally, but everyone can benefit from training. Believe it or not, Clark Gable started out with a high, scratchy tenor voice. Through training, he found his real voice, which was a smooth baritone, and that, frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn, would not sound the same if he had not done it in his real voice. So everybody needs to practice. There's all kinds of vocal exercises. You can look them up on the internet, but all of them start with breathing. However, before discussing breath management, and I have consulted my personal expert on this, we need to look at the principles of posture and alignment, because without good alignment, we can't hope to breathe effectively. So those concepts are the foundation of breathing technique. Now, I think we've all suffered through readers who are not comfortable behind a microphone or in front of an audience. There's physical cues that are very obvious. There's the hunched shoulders, tucked chin, downward gaze. I mean, you get these people who are really rigid from the neck down. They don't move at all, and they have no expression. Occasionally, if someone's truly terrified, you'll get this kind of rocking motion. So I've seen all of that. And it's as uncomfortable for the audience as it is for them, believe it or not. I mean, I just die for these people every time I see that kind of thing. Now, this is not that uncommon at open mics for writers, though, because by definition, writers, in order to get anything done, have to spend a lot of time alone, right? So we're not used to this. It's not our natural part of it's not something we naturally expect to have to do. But, you know, even people who are naturally, are natural performers are going to still tell you that they experience stage fright just like you do. The difference between them and us is they've learned to control it. And it may hit you when you least expect it, and you can't get rid of it, but you can learn to use it, how to overcome it, control it, and even make it part of, you know, when I get ready to do a tour sometimes, I will still get that sudden feeling. It's almost like a thrill to me now. Get that nervous feeling, and it focuses my concentration. And I can always tell when I get that feeling, this is going to be a good night, because it focuses me and I know it's showtime and I got to bring my best game here. So that's how I've managed to practice enough to use that stage fright to make me better at what I do. But we're just at the beginning here. So we're gonna talk first about posture, like I said. Now, for good posture, you want a straight spine, but you want relaxed shoulders so that your chest and rib cage need to be aligned with your hips. I like to think of this, you know, you want your hips aligned with your upper torso, your shoulders and hips are aligned, your head is aligned with your shoulders, everything is in a line. I want you to think about it as if you're a snowman. So your hips and your knees are like the bottom part, right? The big ball at the bottom. And then the second ball, if you're making a snowman, you got to place that second ball right in the middle of the first one, right? It's got to be perfectly aligned or it's going to roll off, right? I mean, this is not using any tricks of slapping frozen ice and stuff like that to wedge it in there. And then the head has to be perfectly placed on the next one. So that's how you're lining up your body. But you're not rigid. snowmen or snow persons, as you might more correctly say, are balanced, but they don't have the sense of movement that you need to have when you're getting ready to do a reading. Winston gave me this analogy of it needs to be like an athlete getting ready to move, like a basketball player getting ready to go up for a jump shot, or a tennis player at the service line getting ready to go one way or the other, just to follow the ball. So you have to have that sense, and your audience has to see that sense that you are relaxed and ready to move and not tense and rigid. So there's lots of ways we're going to do this, and we are going to practice that in a little bit, so I'll come back to that. But posture is all about balance. And of course, once you get your posture right, then you can then we can breathe. But, everybody says, oh, breathing, yeah, duh, everybody breathes. But breathing while you're reading isn't a natural kind of, it takes practice. If you ask singers and actors to name the one thing that's the most important part of their vocal technique, they will talk, 9 out of 10 times, they'll say breathing. If you speak too fast, it might lead you to run out of breath, and therefore your voice kind of goes out on you. If you speak too slowly, you can also not be taking in quite enough air, and that makes you sound dull and lifeless. So you want to be able to vary your pace, your pitch, and your rhythm. And let's talk about this. Pace is matching the speed of your delivery to your material. So, of course, during an exciting chase scene, you're going to want to talk a little bit faster. But it's easy to forget to take enough breath when you're doing that. So you need to look at your thing that you're reading, your piece that you're reading, and mark where you need to breathe. Singers do that all the time. When they look at a bar of music, they see where the pauses are that they can pull some air in. So you need to do that with words. And that's what punctuation is for, by the way. For those of you who are shaky on your punctuation, and I'm not talking to poets because I understand it's a different kind of punctuation there. But that's what it's for. You need to be, even if there's not actual punctuation there, if there's a line break, poets do put line breaks in there because of the pause. I know I started out as a poet, and that's why when I would read it out loud, I could feel where the line break was. So that's part of the reasons those unpunctuated line breaks are there. So you want to start, your pitch is the notes that you use. We use the same notes to speak as we do to sing, but we don't have to hold them as long. And they're much more random and varied. We want to alter our tone to create different characters or to intensify the emotion. And breath control is extremely important in that, because when you're varying your tone, you can sound too strained, and if you're too low, if you don't use enough air. If you get too high and squeaky and scratchy, it can cause tightness in your throat, and that can damage you. So shallow breathing can damage. It causes tenseness and tensing your abdomen. You have to be able to relax your abdomen and upper torso. And one of the things that you might see, and I have seen all my life, is people telling you to relax and use your diaphragm. And according to my family expert, that's impossible. Your diaphragm is an involuntary muscle. You can't control your diaphragm. What you can control is your abdomen. So you can relax your abdomen. And that's hard for us ladies. We've been told all our lives to hold our stomachs in, right? So stop worrying about that. You have to relax your abdomen and let that lower abdomen be the base for the air that's got to come all the way up through to your lungs. And that's really important in maintaining your pitch and changing your pitch. Now, rhythm is the space between thoughts that translates into pauses, and you need a beat to allow your listeners to catch up and absorb what you've said. So this is what comedians call timing. It's that second or two that the audience needs to comprehend and appreciate a joke. Those tiny silences give you a chance to take in some air and relax your shoulders, kind of check your posture. It's really important to vary your rhythm. And I've seen this happen even with experienced poets. They get into this sing-song kind of thing. And you know what? It's a lullaby. It makes you get real sleepy. And even if it's a good poem, that sing-song rhythm it's it gets boring. You stop paying attention to the words. So mark the places where your words need emphasis, where you need to take a breath, where you want to change up or make a full stop. And your voice is an instrument, and you're learning with practice to play it for an audience. And that's what you need to think of it as. Now, projecting physical confidence doesn't come completely immediately, and it's learned just like anything else. So practice is how you learn to overcome it. And now we're going to talk about some exercises. It's really important to have a routine to prepare yourself physically for a reading or a performance. And we're going to go through some exercises that help you relax in the area of your bodies that hold tension. So I'm going to stand up. Feel free. Let me just say that if you feel awkward about this, turn off your video. That's fine. I'm going to put this on speaker view so that you can see me a little bit better. But I'm going to get up, and we're going to go through some, first the posture thing. I talked about how you were supposed to balance yourself. And basically, you're going to put your feet about hip width apart, and make sure your hips are in line with your knees there. Make sure your knees are not locked. We all know better than that. You don't want to faint while you're doing this. Okay, now think about the snowman. You've got the lower part ready. Now we're going to go to the middle part. This is this lower abdomen and rib cage, and important tip, relax the shoulders. This is sometimes easier to see, so I'm going to go turn to the side. It's easier to see from the side if you are lined up. So if you can do this in front of a mirror and see that there's a straight line between your shoulder and your knees, then you're good. The other thing is your neck. You don't want your head back. You don't want it forward. You don't want it hunched down. You want it in line with the rest of your body, and the shoulders need to be relaxed. One of the ways, I want everybody to do this, if you just roll your shoulders like this. All did this in gym class as kids, right? So backwards, forwards, that just to help loosen up those shoulder muscles, because I, in particular, all the years of being a health professional, I hold a lot of tension in my shoulders. So that's one of the things I always have to do is just roll my shoulders. Okay, now I'm going to turn to the side again, because we're going to do another thing where we're going to put your hands on your waist and bend over from the waist. Now, if you're flexible enough, you can go all the way to the floor and touch your toes. If you're not, just go as far as you can. Hang your arms down. Sorry, I did this wrong. Come back up, everybody. You're supposed to go up first, and I forgot that part. So we're going to go up, and then we're going to go down. So first, you're going to reach up, like you're trying to touch the ceiling. So reach up, stretch as far as you can, even up on your toes. Then we're going to go down, hands to the side, and that's when you would bend from the waist. Go all the way down if you can. Touch your toes or the floor, whatever you're flexible enough to do. Then we're coming up very slowly. What you're going to pretend is that you're stacking each vertebra on top of each other, one at a time, until you're completely straight up and back to your basic posture. One of the things that I notice when I do this is sometimes I'll be fine, and then all of a sudden, Laura, you got those tight shoulders again. So Winston taught me a certain position that helps you maintain the straight posture and keep your shoulders relaxed, and that's called Garcia position. It's after Manuel Garcia, who's a famous voice teacher. And you basically put your hands like this and kind of put them in the small of your back. Just relax into that, and you'll notice that your shoulders automatically relax when you do that. So now your shoulders are in the right position, and you can keep them there if that helps you remember that. Or sometimes after I've done it, I can just stop down, my shoulders stay in the right place. So just, if you feel your shoulders creeping up, Garcia position, it's very helpful. So now we're going to go over breath. And now we've been breathing all this time, but we're going to do some deep breathing now. So what I want you to do is, I'm going to sit down again so that you can see me a little bit better, but I want you to breathe through your nose. We're going to do an inhale and an exhale, and I'm going to count off 4 seconds for the inhale, then I'll stop you, and then 4 seconds for the exhale. So ready? Inhale, 4 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now out. 1, 2, 3, 4. Sorry, I went to 5 on the inhale. Now, just do it again. Inhale, 1, 2, 3, 4, hold it. Then exhale, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, very good. Now we're going to do something to show so you can feel your breath. So I want you to put your hands on the lower part of your ribs, right about here, so that when you breathe in, you can feel the expansion. If you can feel an expansion in your lower ribs, you know you're breathing from your abdomen like you're supposed to. So let's try it again. And this time we're going to go for 8 seconds. Okay, so it's going to be longer. You'll get more expansion that way. So ready? Inhale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Hold and exhale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, let's do it one more time. Inhale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Exhale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, now we've been breathing through our nose, but sometimes, nose breathing is what we've all been told to do because it filters the air and it warms it up and kind of helps relax your throat. But sometimes you need a lot of air fast. And for that, you have to use a larger opening, your mouth. So mouth breathing is not bad. In other words, there are times when you need a lot of air quickly that you need to breathe through your mouth. And especially if you are talking in a microphone, nose breathing tends to be very audible. Okay, but if everybody try breathing in through your mouth for just take a big breath through your mouth. Notice how much quieter that was. So if you need a lot of air and you're standing in front of a microphone, it's much quieter to breathe it in through your mouth. Then your audience doesn't hear you go. We've all done the Darth Vader thing, right? So we don't want to sound like Darth Vader. So remember that next time you're having to stand in front of a microphone, that sometimes it's easier to breathe quietly and get more volume through your mouth. Let's just test this. Put your hands back on your lower ribs, and I want you to breathe in through your mouth that as much as you can. Well, I'll count it off to 8 again, and I want you to see if there's a difference in the expansion there. Ready? Inhale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Exhale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So did you feel how much easier it was to get that full expansion through your mouth? It's a useful thing to know. Sometimes you need to use that, and it really does kind of help me lower, because like I said, most ladies have been told all our lives to hold our stomach in. I really have to focus to get that to relax sometimes, and that seems to help a lot. So now we're going to do some humming. I'm not going to make anybody sing, and like I said, you don't have to have your microphone on while you're doing this unless you just want to. But we're just going to, humming helps create back pressure. As I understand it, and I hope Sharon will correct me if I'm not explaining this right, the larger muscles in your neck are there for swallowing. And they're stronger because we need them to be. But you don't talk with those and you don't sing with those. The muscles you sing with are inside your voice box. And in order to get them to function to the best of your ability, you have to relax those swallowing muscles. So we got to get them completely out of the picture. We need to relax those muscles. Keep everything between your chin and your chest has to be totally not there. And what we're trying to do is create some back pressure into your voice box to loosen those vocal folds. And that's what humming does. So first we're going to do humming. So close your mouth. And I'm going to hum the jingle bells, okay? Because, that's easy. Everybody knows jingle bells. So. So think about the way that felt. Did you feel the vibration back in the back of your soft palate? So if you were humming that, you're creating some looseness in your voice box to help undo those folds. And another thing you can do is little bit of vocalization. It's similar to a hum, but you make a different shape with your mouth. And this is one that we've been doing. You make a V sound. It's similar to humming. You're just doing. So you feel that relaxation. If after you've done a couple of rounds of that, you'll start to feel your throat loosening. Your voice starts to kind of find itself more or less. There's another thing you can do to try to get, I talked a little bit earlier about Clark Gable and having his scratchy high voice, then he finally found his true chest voice, which was the baritone. But sometimes it's useful if you're trying to create a character, you might want to use that, what is called their head voice. And with men, it's generally called falsetto. But Winston, when he has been doing my voice lessons, he calls it my Julia Child voice. So I kind of like to think of it that way. It's a funny way to think of it. It helps me remember. But you basically just talk very silly like this, you do, just as high as you can, and just totally feel it up in here. You don't want to feel it in your chest so much, just up in here in your soft palate. I know it is silly as heck and it makes you feel really funny. I can hardly do it without laughing, but talk to your dog, talk to your cat that way. It's a good way to practice feeling the difference between your head voice and your chest voice. And then you can it helps you when you're trying to hit different notes and change the pitch of your voice.
I'm not sure I know what you
mean. Thank you, Stuart. Now, one last thing. This is a straw. It's a metal straw because I'm trying to be sustainable here. And this is a new trick that I've just recently been doing with Winston. And it's talking through a straw. All this humming and the vocalization things we've been doing to create that. But this is even better because of this long tube. It helps create more back pressure to loosen up those folds. So if I take this up and I start reading some of from one of the things that we just looked at. Some years ago, never mind how long precisely, they had money in my purse and nothing in particular to interest me on shore. I thought I would sail about a little and see the watering part of the world. You can't understand me, but believe me, it's an amazing way to relax your throat. I've been doing this since Winston taught me this trick. I've been doing this before I go out on a tour. I'll put the straw in my mouth and I'll say, like an opening speech for my tour through the straw. It really does help loosen up my voice, and I don't run out of steam halfway through a speech anymore. So good thing to try. And like I said, metal straws are all the rage right now. If you didn't want to get one for Christmas, then you don't have any cool friends, okay? All right, so like I said, all this kind of makes you feel silly, but it's really important to do this routine and to practice it, because that is how you relax into this. This is how you create that space and that physical confidence to be able to get to that next level where you visualize yourself inside the world that you are imagining and you're able to share that with your audience. As you practice telling the story, you have to use your inner eye to see all these things you're speaking of and allow whatever emotions the story creates in you to become real. This can be hard because emotions are not always positive. There are negative emotions like sadness and anger and fear, and those are going to be in any good story. There's going to be some negative emotions as well as positive ones. And you can't be afraid of that. You can't try to block these off, because if you block the negative ones, you're going to block all of them. So your telling will be wooden and flat, and your audience will be bored. On the other hand, you have to be able to control your reaction to the emotion, because you don't end up bursting into tears or shouting with rage. It scares people. So this is why you practice. You repeat, practice, repeat, until you know exactly where it is. Those feelings are going to start pouring into you, and you can stay on top of your reaction by breathing through it. And I'm not saying this is not going to take something out of you. When I have been on a tour with people for 2 hours and I have talked most of that 2 hours and interacted with people for I am wiped sometimes. But if I do it right, then the energy that I'm putting out there comes back. and it starts to leak back my way, and I will start it will cause my performance to get better and better. The imagination is a fine servant, but a poor master. I don't know who said that, but that's what you want to, that's why you practice, because you're harnessing your imagination and instead of letting it run away with you, you're teaching it to work with you and for you. And why, you may be asking yourself at this point, why would a writer want to work this hard? And, the thing is, we can't sit in our garrets anymore. Yeah, we have to sit there because we're not allowed to go anywhere, but we have to be able to sell our own books. Publishers don't sell your books for you anymore. You don't get to sit and write them and just hand them to somebody else who does all the marketing. They expect you to be able to market not just your books, but yourself. And that is it's very important to be able to present yourself to an audience and engage them with you so that they will be engaged with your work as well. And, some of you know that I have a small publishing label. And so I have to tell you that meeting a publisher is just like meeting an audience. You've got to present yourself to the publisher the same way you would to an audience. And, if your book is so fabulous that I might choose to work with you on your persona if your book was that good. But it's less likely that someone's going to pick up on you if you aren't able to present yourself well. So nothing sells your books like you do. And most publishers are looking for a writer who is ready to go out there and share their stories and share them effectively. So it is something it's a skill all of us need. And even if you never want to publish and you just want other people to hear your stories, this is a good way to make them listen. So, storytelling, we talk about words all the time as writers, but storytelling is older than words. Before there was a written language, people were telling stories. So what we're doing is a very ancient art. And by continuing to share them orally, we're continuing to make the connections. Even in the times like tonight when we can't actually be in the same room, we are still able to connect with each other by how we tell our stories. Okay, that's all I got. If anybody has questions, feel free to ask me any of those things, and unmute yourselves if you're muted. If you have a question, just or you can ask them in the chat too. I think I can see the chat line. So, okay, Risa.
I have a question about eye contact. Now, I'm guessing that you're saying that if you're doing this storytelling, that it has to be memorized, correct?
Not necessarily, no.
Okay.
I mean, I've done a lot of readings like tonight. I did not have all my notes memorized, but I made plenty of eye contact.
Okay, so then it is all right to use, the printed copy, but you need to just do as best as you can to engage the audience by directly looking at them.
Well, that's where the practice comes in. If
Okay.
you know your material well enough, I mean, like I said at the beginning, you don't expect to get it word for word as what is printed there. And that's not going to happen. But you're going to do a better job of putting it across if you don't stare at the words the whole time. Right. And eye contact is something that's kind of situational. When I'm in a group with a tour, a lot of times it's a small group, so I can make eye contact with each person. Lately, this past year, it's always been a small group, but in other situations where I have a group of, say, 20, 25 people, I might not be able to make eye contact with all of them, but the fact that I could be, you still want to be talking towards those people more than you're talking towards your notes. That's the important thing. The engaging part is that if you practice enough, you have this down so that you don't lose your place. It's okay to look back down to remind yourself about what's next. And I'm sure all of you saw me do that tonight, but you've got to be able to know it well enough that you know what, you don't have to have word for word what's coming next. So.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
You see Marilyn's question, what is your feeling about gestures?
I think gestures are great. I talk with my hands all the time. Now, in certain situations, they can be somewhat distracting if you overdo it, you know, and so I've seen people knock over a water glass. I've done that myself. or bump into the microphone, you know, or whatever. So you do need to be careful about that. But like I said, I think gestures, as long as they're not real formalized, there was this one poet, and I absolutely love this guy, but every time he does a poetry reading, he does this. I mean, he does it like a metronome. And I'm just like, stop that. So that's the sort of thing I'm talking about. It could be distracting. I mean, if you don't do it in a certain, you know, if you don't get caught into a rhythm of doing it at, you know, like that, it's, you know, and a lot of times in the voice lessons I've been doing with Winston, you know, he'll be singing a note and he does this, but to him, it's more like a motion of the sound going out. And to me, I want you to think about that as your sound's going out, and sometimes your hands are helpful for that, and sometimes they're not. So just be careful not to, you know, not to get too formalized about it. Is all I say. If it looks natural, that's fine.
So,
Well, Laura,
Let's
can I ask? It seems to me, not that I don't have much experience doing this, but from being at a lot of readings and watching people who've come through the Guild in years, it seems difficult for people to figure out what it is they are to read and how much of it. Because as a reader, I don't think they want me to go away feeling like I'm bored. But sometimes the readings are just, they're too long or not selected the way, you know, I don't know what is in people's minds sometimes.
Yeah, well, like I said, a lot of it is what I talked about in the beginning, where people kind of focus on what they think is a passage of beautiful writing. It's a description of the scene, which is great in a book, but in a reading, that's not good. I mean, it's something needs to be happening. You know, you can't just be looking at a painting. You have to be able to, if it's a scene, it has to be happening to you. You can't be standing and looking at something. And a lot of times they just choose the wrong material for a reading. A lot of it is lack of practice. Like I said, if you don't practice your readings, you should start and go through the reading and mark where you need to stop and breathe and all those sorts of things. That's really important. People don't take the time to do that, especially, you know, and I was as guilty as anybody else when I was, you know, first starting and I went to an open mic. I would have like 16 poems in like 3 minutes and I knew I wasn't going to be able to read them all those. So what I would always end up doing is trying to choose the ones that I thought were best for this particular audience. And, you know, audiences are different. You know, writers are probably one of the tougher audiences because they're really listening to that words. They're paying attention to your language, you know, so that's harder. If you're talking to a group of you know, school kids or artists or whatever, they're not going to pay quite as much attention to your words. And actors are, to me, the worst to try to perform for, because they're evaluating your performance the whole time and not paying a bit of attention to what you're saying. So it's just, you know, it's all situational. You kind of have to say, okay, this is my audience. What kind of thing do I think they would like to hear? You know, a lot of, you know, I think I really miss the days when we did open mics at bars, because once people have had a few drinks, they'll applaud at anything. So KB's laughing. She knows what I mean. But that's, you know, it's good practice to get out there in front of strangers, because it's harder to me to talk to people I know in an audience situation, because even though I love you guys and, you know, like I said, you're part of my family, I still feel like I have to put forth an extra effort for you guys. It's a little harder. You guys are harder to impress.
So what about interpretive dance? I would be very impressed by interpretive dance.
Will you show us how it's done, Stuart?
Yes, Stuart, you're reading next.
Next month, it's interpretive dance. That's it. That's me.
Sounds good, Stuart. I can't wait for that one. You are going to wear a tutu, I hope, because I really expect that of a dancer. So.
Well, no, a onesie, a leotard. Yeah.
Laura, I want to thank you so much for this presentation. It is so helpful, exactly what I needed. I'm a newbie, fledgling, just starting out. And I get really nervous getting up on stage. Although I've been a teacher for a very long time, for some reason that's really easy for me to do. But
Well, that's
give me
the
my
whole
chat.
secret.
Yeah, give me my chat book and my own poetry to read, and oh my God. So this is really helpful. And I'm wondering, I love homework, and I'm wondering if you could recommend a daily routine or rituals that you would recommend, especially for a fledgling.
Well, I would definitely practice the breathing exercises we did tonight, and do that thing where you line yourself up in front of a mirror, you know, turn to the side, make sure you're lined up properly. Do that Garcia position to make sure your shoulders are relaxed, because it really is helpful. Even as, you know, as much as I've talked in front of audiences, just learning how to do that and check my shoulders has been really helpful to me, because like I said, I do tend to carry a lot of tension there. But if you do the breathing exercises, just the breathing in and out first, and then, you know, like I said, with your hands on your lower ribs so you can feel like it's coming from the right part. Any kind of stretching you can do, you know, the bending over thing we did where you stretch and you reach up. Any of those stretches that you do, that you learned in gym class, even the ones where you know, stretch from side to side, anything that will help loosen up your torso and your shoulders, it's going to be helpful. And I do exercise pretty much every day. So I do stretching as part of my exercise routine. And that's, you know, that's part of what I do, because I do walking tours. I don't want to get out of shape. So I'm constantly working on that. But it's just, you know, it's hard to talk and walk and climb a hill at the same time. So I can't get out of shape. But you know, if you practice that breathing and also just practice reading to yourself in the mirror, or if the mirror makes you feel awkward, put yourself on the Zoom screen with, you know, when you're not in a meeting, just take your video settings and put yourself on the screen and talk to yourself that way. I find that easier than a mirror for some reason. I don't know why. Maybe it just seems like more like I'm used to that. But like I said, most of my relaxed ability to talk to people is because I have practiced so much. So if you get into a routine of practicing, and anytime you have a reading coming up, you know, like I said, I would always go with more material than I needed in the beginning. At the end, I always bring probably less than I really could do. but it's just, to me, less is more. So you just, you know, you have to judge from the time frame and the audience that you're reading to, how quickly they're going to get bored. You know, and you said that about you're used to being a teacher. Well, that's the whole secret. You know, you just have to get used to reading poems from your chat book, and then you'll feel that same comfort. And you can kind of use some of those same things that help you feel comfortable to your class, you know, talking to your class. These people don't know, you know, as much about your poems as you know, Patricia. So just, you know, keep that in mind. And you don't have to, like I said, never explain a poem. Never explain that. I have got some of the most interesting explanations of my poems that are totally, completely different from what I would have said they were about. But to me, that's the beauty of poetry. It's a language all on its own. So,
one other thing that I would like to add, Laura, is that I've found to be very helpful that I discovered on my own was in preparation for the holiday, actually, event last month, which was fabulous. I hope we have more of those. I practiced with my video on my phone, my iPhone. I just turned on the video and presented several different poems, and then chose the one I wanted to. I totally blew it during the actual reading, but I had a lot of practice with a variety of different material. And then I was able to look back, you know, play the video and critique my performance. Like, oh, don't use your hands so often. Don't gesticulate a lot, you know.
Yeah.
Or
well, you know, that's always important, and that's part of practice. And you can tape yourself. I used to do that a lot. I would tape myself and just play it back and say, okay, you need to remember, you know, to breathe at that section. You're sounding kind of tight there. You're running out of breath on that particular section. And just especially since my tours are, the speeches that I give during my tours are quite long. Some of the, you know, I have to divide them up into stories. So I would record the different stories and just play it in my car till I had it memorized. And you can talk along with it. And that way you notice, oh, that doesn't sound quite right. You can edit and change things to make it a little bit crisper if you listen to yourself. So that's a good tip too, is to record yourself either on video or on audio, or both. I mean, just do that, and that, especially if you've got something big coming up, that's a good thing to do. All right. Well, it looks like it's 8 o'clock. I'm sure everybody's probably about ready to go. I thank everyone for letting me talk. We'll turn this back over to Cindy if she has any closing remarks or announcements to make.
Thank you, Laura.
But yeah, it was great, Laura.
You're very well done, Laura. Thank you.
Thank you. This is just what I needed to hear. So thank you very, very much. Let me see. On the subject of programs, I want to thank Melanie Sakala for her great work getting our programs and workshops together the last couple of years. Our very brand new, just started program chair is Bob Beasley, who talked about February already. Yay, and thank you, Bob.
Yes.
And then I think Jeanette is gone already, but she's workshops, and she said she's got a couple of months nailed down already. So we will be getting more information out about what's coming up this year. Smart people are working hard on it, so it will happen. Yes, Bob?
I'd just say,
Question.
who? Go ahead.
Okay, just a quick one. How do we get in touch with Laura Still in future, as well as you said your son-in-law, who's a coach?
Oh, my son. Let me go ahead and give you, Winston said I could give his email address, and I've got it written down here somewhere if I can find it. It's from the first page of my speech, if I can find it. Okay, here we are. wsullivan865@gmail.com. If you have vocal technique questions or want to pursue that in a professional way, he's your guy. To get in touch with me, you can see my Walking Tours website behind me here. That's my work phone number, so use that sparingly, but you can email me there. And also, if you want to email me, just I think members should have my email on the website in the member directory. But if you don't have it, mine is weird. So write this down. It's Eunice, EUNICEHAT. So EuniceHat865@gmail.com. And that's if you have questions for me or any want some ideas or think of something later that you forgot to ask at the time, feel free to email me. Thanks.
I just wanted to say that too, if you have ideas about programs that you would like to hear about, or someone you know that would be good at giving a program, it would help broaden our catalog of them if you would let me know about that. And I'm Bob Beasley at charter.net. Really one word, Bob Beasley at charter.net. I'd appreciate your help.
Mm-hmm. Okay. With that, I think we're through. Thanks for coming. Good to see everybody.
Good to see everyone.
All right, thank you, Laura.
See you next time.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.